Hi, everybody, and welcome to Book Buzz. Happy spring. We're here as usual to talk about the books that we've been reading recently and to share with you so that you can find your next great read. My name is Karen Stern. I'm here with Brigid and Jackie and Alyssa, and we have a wide variety today. We're going to start with Brigid.
Okay, so I'm here to talk about Made for Love by Elissa Nutting. I'm gonna try to get that into the camera. Not really working. Which is a relatively recent book. I think it's from so it's from 2017, according to and it is the story of Hazel, who divorces her tech billionaire husband, and I should say divorces is not really the right term, leaves him, and leaves him isn't right either. Escapes is the word that I would really use. And it's sort of set in an absurdist present, near present. So it was written in 2017, but it was set in 2018 and 2019 is kind of roughly the times, but it's obviously not set in the real world. Her husband is named Byron Gogol and is kind of a Google type, like owns a Google type company that controls everything. So she leaves him because he may or may not have implanted a brain chip in her mind to control her behavior and also to be able to read all of her thoughts all of the time. And that is why she has fled back to her widowed father's house, who has just purchased a sex doll. So that is the theory, is that she comes in and her widowed father has a sex doll in the living room. So that sort of gives you kind of the level where you are. It is, as I said, it's surreal and absurd and like a heightened reality. I guess I'm just bringing the like books that are slightly weird and almost Black Mirror-ish to Book Buzz, because it's similar to Little Eyes, which is the last book I talked about. But
I loved that one.
I would say tonally this is like very different from that. It is, I think it's written has a very light tone, despite the fact that it is dealing with really heavy subjects like death and spousal abuse, essentially, and depression and all of those things. It still is funny because it is absurd, and I found it to be a very enjoyable read. It's a fairly quick read. It's not a huge book. It does jump around in time a little bit, and I should also say that another main character in this book is dealing with a very different issue, which is that he has a sexual attraction to dolphins. So
there you go.
Yes, so it's definitely not a book if you are don't want to read anything with sexual themes, because it certainly is a lot about that, even though it's not like pornographic or explicit. It is sort of about that on a lot of levels, like desire and love and human connection and technology and all of those things. I really liked it. I think it was a very fun read. Like the like topic will keep you guessing, and it is sort of mysteries, and you are sort of like trying to puzzle things out and figure out, such as like, is there a chip in Hazel's brain? We don't know. So that would be my recommendation. I'm sorry, it's really hard to describe this book because it isn't like a lot of other things.
I think that might be a theme today, the hard to describe book, because I'm about to say the same thing about mine.
So
is there any romance in this? Because at first when you gave me the title, I was like, looks like it might be a romance.
No, not really. Like I would not say there are relationships, but they are not necessarily romantic, even if they are sexual. Like it is not really about that. It obviously, like, the main character is Hazel, and it is a lot about how she interacts with the world, including sort of, you find out why she ended up married to Byron and her relationship with her parents, which is very complicated and complex, and sort of the differences between her experiences before her marriage and her experiences in her marriage, and why she is the way she is in different ways. Which is
logical exploration of her for one part. anyway.
Yes. And I would say she's definitely the main character. The other sort of side plots are in service of her. Like she is the most important character in the book. So
do they make you root for her? Because I feel like in a lot of surrealist books or absurdist books, a connection with the main character can help readers who don't usually read that.
yes, I thought that is what I would say. I was like, if you enjoy like complex female characters, Hazel absolutely is that, and a character who is worth rooting for, even if only to begin with, because you are so in her perspective from her like leaving her marriage, that it instantly sort of makes you root for her over, I mean, an absurdist tech billionaire who is like actively kind of a bad person, and not just like personally, but like bad for the world, as she is describing him. So I do think that does help you pull you through.
Is it all told from her perspective?
It is not all told from her perspective. It is a third person, and as I said, there is another competing plot that is like a secondary plot, which is Jasper, who is the person with the unfortunate sexual condition, as he often thinks of it.
That is unfortunate, yes.
Yeah, so that is I do want to say, like, there's a major warning that like there's a lot of like sexual themes and sort of out there ideas in here that you have to be prepared to accept when you're reading them. I didn't know that in particular, but that's not something that bothers me. But if it would bother a reader, it's probably not the book for you, because it is, well, it's not like explicit on those things. It is about it in a way.
Right.
Am I crazy, or is HBO coming out with a show about this?
That's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say there is a show. It's gonna be on HBO Max starting tomorrow.
It sounded so familiar, and I was like, no, I definitely haven't read the book. Why do I feel like I know this?
Yeah, and it stars Kristen Milioti, who was in Palm Springs over the summer as Hazel.
And is it literally a book, a TV show about this book?
Yes, it is an adaptation of this book. It's an adaptation of this book. Though I will say, from looking at the cast list, I think that they have cut out the dolphin attraction part of it and focus more on Hazel, which I do think is the stronger part of the book. I think that other part is I did not particularly feel the other character, his name is Jasper, is not particularly interesting or rootable for in the way that Hazel is. So you can make your own decisions, but that was my own. I think that Hazel was a great character. I really liked it. I really liked her, and I am excited to see a television show because I really like Kristen Milioti as well. So
there's a lot of that connection going on out there right now. It's cool. It's fun.
Yeah,
to be
so
able
like
to watch.
yeah, another like tech absurdity, but I think this one is more very character focused. Still, if that's what you read for. So that's Made for Love by Elissa Nutting.
Alrighty.
Good. I want to read that before I see it.
Well, and when I started reading it, I almost was going to ask, you put it in an email, but I was gonna be like, Alyssa, have you ever read this? Because it feels like exactly your kind of book.
It's on my Goodreads list. When I saw the cover, I was like, oh yes. That very striking pastel kind of like beach scene.
Yeah, it has kind of like an airbrushed t-shirt you buy at the beach ball cover. Yeah. But yeah, so if you're a person who likes books Alyssa recommends, this is probably a book for you.
We have a lot of overlapping book tastes.
Yeah.
Well, I have another book that Alyssa wants to read too. She told me.
I know.
Mine is called, and I was really excited. Mine's called Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro, which, believe it or not, I've never read any Ishiguro, which is like a scandal for a librarian, right? I mean, he's a Nobel Prize winner. Anyway, I love this book, and it's also hard to characterize. It is science fiction, but it really doesn't feel like it at all as you're reading it. It's a novel that focuses on character and relationships, but how do you think about character when the main character isn't human? And it's a simply and beautifully told story on the surface, but it's kind of like a good myth or a folk tale. That simplicity there's a whole lot of stuff going on beneath it that, but before I go into that, I'll explain who the narrator is, and I'll set the scene a little bit. The narrator is Clara of the title. She's a sophisticated AI, a robot for want of a better word. She's not like any robot. She's much more human. She's humanoid. She's called an artificial friend, or an AF. And technically she is a B2 model. And although B2s are good at empathy, Clara kind of has like superpowers, not real superpowers, but like she's just very good at empathy, extremely good at empathy. AFs have been created in this world to be companions for children who no longer go to school, but learn on devices from home. Does that sound familiar? And only gather with other kids in coordinated meetings that they call interactions. So the AF's job is basically to be like the child's best friend, a job which, again, with those superpowers that Clara has, she takes very seriously. And a teenager named Josie, with an unnamed but serious illness, chooses Clara to be her AF, and Clara comes home to live with her in this like rural suburb setting, surrounded by rolling farmlands and fields outside of this big city. It's a suburban setting that you can imagine existing today, and really like the whole frame of this book is a world that is both familiar and unfamiliar. So for one, you've got these AIs dotted around the place or the AFs who are the friends. The other thing that's new about this world is that some of the children, the youngest generation, have had the opportunity to become what they call lifted or enhanced. Like, the author doesn't really go into what the mechanism for enhancement is. You don't know if it's genetic enhancement or some kind of AI, but there's, in this world, then what happens is there's this almost new caste system, which again might feel kind of familiar, which is the lifted versus the unlifted. So the gifted versus the not so gifted. There is also there are people who've been replaced by machines and are living in communities with other post-employed people. And then that leads to some factionalization where some of the factions are dabbling in fascism, which also feels a little familiar. There's a lot of people struggling with loneliness. Also feels a little bit familiar, especially in this time. It's kind of amazing. He wrote this book totally before the pandemic, but a lot of the themes will remind you of the current situation. Anyway, so Clara comes home with Josie, who is a lifted teen and who has this mysterious illness. And there is one of the mysteries of the book is about Josie and what her illness is, and will she survive, and what it means to be lifted. And Clara's voice is our sole guide through this world. And because she's like an AI, her voice feels kind of a little detached. It's also kind of a childlike. She watches the world and she studies facial expressions and body language. And she uses this is for her, it's all data coming in to try to figure humans out. And again, she's very good at this. So she's constantly, looking at juxtapositions of emotions, like somebody who looks really happy, but then also seems kind of upset, and trying to put together what that might mean and how it might feel like. So as we go through the book, we're getting this kind of fresh look at humanity, like a new angle from which to look at ourselves. And from that angle, Ishiguro then goes deep into these themes that will be really familiar to his regular readers, like, what does it mean to be in service to someone, which was kind of the theme of Remains of the Day, right? What is the value of true love? How does love exist alongside human failings? What does it mean to be a parent or a child? How do we describe and define the magic that is human life? What place does religion have in life? And that actually is an interesting one. That goes back to the title, Clara and the Sun. She's solar powered. So for her, the sun is God. And he is all giving, all beneficent, he's able to, for her, in her mind, she has complete faith in the sun. So it explores religion in that way. And she kind of, in her quest to help Josie, she goes to the sun for help. So there's an interesting story there. And then again, the question of loneliness and what is the antidote to loneliness. So you kind of might say that all of this seems a lot like topics that sci-fi and speculative fiction have done or tried to do before. And so what's the big deal about this? But I really felt after putting it down, like Ishiguro's using Clara and his immense talent as a writer, he's kind of given us this perspective that does feel truly fresh. And I'm gonna say, in its kind of really beautiful simplicity, it feels like a work of art, a very accessible one, I would add, like not one that's hard to read at all. But I would definitely highly recommend that you try it.
I feel like if you hadn't told me that he wrote this, I would know. And I've only read Never Let You Go. Never
Let You Go, I think, is, if you like Never Let You Go, I get the feeling you probably.
It's very in that vein, like that kind of idea that there's the them and the like the two groups. One is, like, as you say, in service to the other group, really.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
it's all
and Remains of the Day is all
very,
Butler who's in service to this guy so much so that he can't
right.
remember how to be in love. And there's like, the themes are really similar. And again, I can't compare it to, has anybody else read, you said you've read the Never Let You Go.
I've only read Never Let Me Go, or Never Let You Go. I can't remember.
Yeah.
And that was a million years ago, but
yeah, I've only seen Remains of the Day as a movie. I haven't read the book, but anyway.
Sounds so dense, but
it's not
accessible at the same time, which is amazing. And I feel like some sci-fi feels really heavy and like bogged down. You kind of slog through it, but this feels.
Yeah, that's exactly what I felt.
Yeah, the other one, the one I read, was just like that. Like, you
luminous.
Didn't recognize the heaviness until the end.
That's amazing.
His writing is just amazing. He just has this way with that kind of a story. And it's not the sci-fi of 15 million characters all competing and battling it out and in order to make the point. It's just so sort of subtle and understated in a way, but I really liked it.
It's kind of a short book too, isn't that kind of small?
It's
ish.
It's 300 pages. I mean, it's average.
Yeah, it just feels like there's just so much
to say. From the description, it feels like you should be describing like a 500 or 700 page book.
Yeah, I mean, I feel as soon as I finished it, I was like, this is one I definitely want to read again. This is one I definitely want to do with the book group. Like, there's so much to delve into, but you don't feel the heaviness. It's like one of those light hand creams that it's very moisturizing, but it's not sticky.
Doesn't stop you from touching everything.
So, Alyssa.
Yeah, I'm gonna go, and it's just funny because I have wanted to read both Brigid's book and your book, Karen, and I read something that's so anti Alyssa's usual reading choices. So, here we go. I'm gonna talk about Betty by Tiffany McDaniel. I've heard a lot about this. I heard a lot about it before I picked it up. The cover is really striking, so you may have seen it around. But I'm going to start with a quote from, there's a short prologue, but this is how the book actually begins, part one. So it starts with, a girl comes of age against the knife. She must learn to bear its blade, to be cut, to bleed, to scar over and still somehow be beautiful and with good enough knees to take the sponge to the kitchen floor every Saturday. You're either lost or you're found. And so I was actually leafing through this in our foyer, trying to decide what I wanted to read next. And I read that and I was just hooked from the beginning. But you can probably tell from that quote that it's not a particularly easy read. It's kind of a beautiful but brutal quote, and it's about being a young woman, especially in the book's time frame, which is the 1960s in Appalachia. So I'm gonna start by saying that many reviewers, including novelists, has called this heart-wrenching, but and I'm gonna get into that, but I want to preface it all by saying that I absolutely have no regrets reading this. It's going to stick with me a long time, and I really think there's so much beauty in this that it is worth kind of the pain that as a reader you do go through following these characters. So Tiffany McDaniel is the author. And about 20 years ago, her real mother, Betty, told her about a family secret. So the author kind of takes that secret and fictionalizes it in this book. And she's aided by interviews with her mother, interviews with her grandmother, and interviews with other family members. So it's not a work of nonfiction, but there's a lot of truth here for the author. So the book begins with Betty's parents meeting, and her parents were a white woman and a Cherokee man, and they meet in a small conservative white town. And that's kind of paints a picture of where they started their relationship and how difficult that was for them. So out of this mixed race marriage comes Betty, and Betty Carpenter is born in a bathtub. She is the fourth of 6 siblings, and she is called Little Indian by her father because she inherited his darker features, and also she has a strong affinity with the Cherokee people and a profound love of nature as well. Here's the hard part. Here's where it gets hard. So Betty faces challenges everywhere she goes. So outside of the home and inside of the home, really, she is persecuted and ostracized because of her deep skin tone. And she also, inside the home, she endures all variations of sexual abuse and poverty, depression, and suicide. And these are the big plot points of the book. But I despite all this kind of violence that Betty faces growing up, the author fills this story with so much beauty and love. So her descriptions, her style is so lyrical and complex, with, you know, lush descriptions of the landscape and these incredibly authentic and heartwarming interactions between Betty and her siblings and her parents, or at least her father. So her father's name is Landon Carpenter. I want to talk about him for a minute, because he really serves as kind of the moral compass of the entire story for his children. And oh my gosh, he is such a good character. He provides his children with, you know, magic and this deep wisdom and gives them autonomy and comfort. And these are all things that their mother, who is prone to bouts of violence, and she's really erratic, she can't provide that. And Betty and Landon in particular are really close. Again, he has that nickname for her. They have this deep and special bond. And it's honestly one of the most striking and memorable relationships I've read in a book in a long time, especially a parent-child relationship. And as Betty learns about the Cherokee heritage from her father, the readers do too, which is a big part of this book. And I felt like I was being let in on a culture that I don't have an avenue to see otherwise. It really feels authentic. I mean, it's true. And it was really moving. And some of the stories that Landon tells Betty, they resonated so deeply with me. They're just going to stay with me forever. So her characterization is spot on with these characters and with all of them. I will say a couple of specific red flags, because I know that these can be deal breakers for some readers. Violence and abuse inflicted on children, and multiple counts of abuse on animals as well. The abuse against animals can be brief, but there are some that are quite horrific. So I do want to say that is a profound red flag. But I'm telling you that it is so, the book is so worth these moments. The beauty far outweighs the pain. And I want to end with the author, and the author is quoted in an interview, and I really think this sums up an important reason to read the book. So she says, I hope Betty's and Landon's stories of racism help see us what hate can do and how it can affect people's lives. I also hope it's an inspiring story for women in general, that it becomes a book mothers want to share with their daughters and that sisters want to share with their sisters, and that we see women and girls represented in ways that push back against the stereotypical images of what it's supposed to mean to be a woman. And I do think this book does that, and it seems like it has brought a lot of catharsis for the author and her family as well in writing this. So I recommend it. It's beautiful. It's a hard read, but a really important one.
I can concur. As far as I've gotten in it, it is very, very, it is all the things that Alyssa says. It's beautiful, absolutely beautiful book. So, and hard.
Yeah, it's heavy. It's heavy. I know. I feel like I brought the whole conversation like,
No, not at all.
And I really don't usually do the family kind of saga story. I'm definitely more like absurd humor person, but man, it hooked me from the beginning. I couldn't wait to pick it up every time. I couldn't wait to pick it up.
Yeah, it's a book that's really driven by just like the little interactions of life, you know, these little scenes of family life. And I love that. I think it just brings home, you know, it kind of like, not that, yeah, it's not the same as Ishiguro, but that same idea of these kind of simple tales that give much bigger.
Absolutely, yeah.
Bigger stories, yeah. Okay, last, Jackie.
I commend you all for reading such deep books. I can't right now, like I just can't do it. I don't have the bandwidth. So I'll bring the conversation back up with my murder mystery as I always do.
That's why we put you last.
So I read The Postscript Murders by Elly Griffiths, and most people know her from her Ruth Galloway series. She also has another series, The Brighton Mysteries, which it used to be the Magic Men Mysteries, and then the name changed because she kind of dropped the magic theme, but still good. She also writes a kid series, but she wrote 2 summers ago, 2019, she wrote what I thought was a standalone and what I think was intended to be a standalone, because I looked at something on her Amazon page and it says, and the author of a standalone, The Stranger Diaries. Turns out it's not. So this book whether she intended it to be originally or not is the beginning, the second book in this, the Harbinger Cour mysteries. And she is a detective. She's a Sikh, which is, I find fascinating. She was a great character. And I think I remember saying to someone, maybe you, Karen, that I really just found her to be really different. In terms of the world of detective fiction. She was different and I really liked her. And I wish she was going to be an ongoing character. And here she is again. She is friends with the character from the main character from the last book, Claire, but she only has she's just a friend in this book. But this one is pretty funny. I found this to be an interesting blend to the last books I talked. The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman, and basically any Anthony Horowitz. I last talked to the Moonflower Murders, but it's all that same vein. This one, I would not, she's, the Ruth Galloway mysteries, and actually the Brighton mysteries also, I wouldn't describe, she's not cozy. Her mysteries aren't quite cozy, but they're not that dark either. They're always they're very readable. They tend not to be overly gory, but they do deal, sometimes the subject matter can be kind of, just children, or that, it can be a little dark. I found this one to be even a little lighter than most of her usual fare. Partially because of the characters. I think they were this close to caricatures in some places, but it was okay. It was they were just shy of that line, in the way that Anthony Horowitz does that too. A lot of his characters are sort of shade a little just ridiculous, but heightened, yes. But so this one, The Postscript Murders, is about it starts with the death of a 90-year-old woman, Peggy, which on the surface doesn't seem like a murder because she was 90. and her caretaker Natalka, who is this kind of 20-something beautiful Ukrainian who dabbles in cryptocurrency trading, who's her caretaker, finds her dead in her chair, and she finds it suspicious. She's just seen her. She seemed like she was in good health. Her heart medication's right next to her. She seemed fine. So she kind of decides on her own that this was a murder, and she's going to solve it. Sorry, dog. She's going to solve it. Or she does try and get the police involved, which is where Detective Core comes in. But she's not really worried about that. She's going to do this on her own, and she enlists the help of Peggy, the woman who dies, her neighbor Edwin, who is this kind of dapper former BBC personality who's now 80, and Benedict, who owns the coffee shop across the street and is a former monk. So, like I said, it shades a little hokey. But then there are these three other, it ends up being this kind of like, I guess they kind of travel, they go to a literary festival, and it's a little much. But there's also three author characters who in my heads were James Patterson, Gillian Flynn, and John Kennedy Toole. So they were these kind of caricatures of authors.
ANY festival, is it?
No, it was not. Oh, I love ANY. That's my live stream.
Yes, I know.
Edinburgh, which just may be fictional, but it was one of those books where there's just red herrings every time you turn around. You're like, oh, it's this guy, and then you're like, oh no, it's not. But it kept you guessing. It kept you entertained. It was funny. You continue to get to know the detective Harbinger and her family, and she's in her mid-30s. She lives with her parents. She doesn't really want to, but it was a kind of the word that comes to mind is romp.
Yeah.
Kind of a delightful little romp. And yeah, like I said, lighter than some of her usual fare, but still but not so cozy that it was like puns and
We're not predictable.
I didn't find it predictable. I'm not one to usually guess, so other people might have found it, but I didn't really. I was by the ending, but and it definitely leaves the door open. I get the very distinct impression that there will be more of these books, and
Right.
to look forward to. But,
Some character development to look forward to in the future as well.
yes, which I think she does exceptionally well, particularly for her main characters. You do get very attached,
Right.
to a lot of her main characters. So it was a little something different, but
Well, a good escape.
it was an escape. Yes, it was not anywhere on the level of what you're reading. Yeah. I'm just biding time till the next Maisie Dobbs comes out, so, which is like today.
I feel that my selections for this show give a very incorrect impression of my reading habits, because I always
It's true.
that's something that has something to talk about, as opposed to the like 4 romance novels I've read and or like a few forgettable thrillers that I've read. So don't feel like it's like I pick my fanciest book to help people, but that's not really me.
Yeah, I balance these books out with like hours of terrible reality TV. So it's not all heaviness and serious.
Totally. We all have to like, for sure.
About your mood. So
Yeah.
hopefully we've given you a selection here. So
Whatever you need.
what mood you're
Pretty
in.
much in this one, yeah.
Everybody's different tastes, moods.
So I just want to say, as speaking of books to read, and we have a book discussion coming up that's related to our Commit to Your Community theme, and it's a classic by Octavia Butler called The Parable of the Sower. It's a really good book. Also deals with deep themes, but in a very readable way, through character, through it's set in a near-ish future. It's actually set in this particular decade that we are now in, except it's not quite what we're seeing now, but you can imagine it. You can definitely imagine it. It was written back in the 80s, and this is how she projected into the future. So join us for that. Grab the book from the library and come and talk about it on the 27th of April. I believe that is correct. Yes.
Sounds right.
Yeah.
And would you say that book is for like teens and up? Because I have this idea of it that it's kind of could be a multi-generational thing that you talk about with your family.
I can definitely see, yes, a teen and up. I mean, the character herself is, she starts out as a teen.
Yeah, I was like, the main character is a teen for part of it.
Okay.
At least.
So,
and
it's certainly about a young woman coming of age. I mean, that is very much at the heart of what it is. So
I'm also going to say, if reading lots of text has been a barrier during this pandemic, it has been for many people, including myself sometimes, there's a graphic novel version, which we also have.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yep. So we have the regular print version, we have graphic novel version for those of you who are, short on attention span, or just like a more
if you are more into art.
Yeah. And then of course you can listen to it and you can read it on ebook as well. All of those are available from the library.
The graphic novel is also even on Overdrive.
Yeah,
That's
I'm pretty sure we have an electronic copy of the graphic novel as well. So
any way you want to slice it, you've got this book available to you. And so just head over to wakefieldlibrary.org. You can check out the book at the catalog there. You can sign up in the events calendar for the discussion on April 27th. And we hope to see you there. And for that, I think that's all we've got for you today. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Book Buzz.